Sauron, the White Witch, Emperor Palpatine, fiction is filled with this archetype of evil, the great Dark Lord who casts a shadow across the entire story. And as simple and cliche as this archetype may be, these are the types of antagonists that can often cement themselves in the pantheon of fantasy's greatest villains. While there are countless other flavors of villain, flawed, relatable human villains, villains who have a slow journey to gaining power over the course of the story, villains who remain as recurring rivals for the protagonist, so on and so forth. Generally, if the author wants to maximize a sense of absolute overwhelming power, then an unjust, all-controlling Dark Lord who has everyone under their thumb tends to carry a weight and gravitas to them that other villain archetypes can't match. And this type of villain is also arguably the best option for a story about rebellion, which is precisely why Emu is such a fascinating potential final boss for One Piece. While of course there is still a very compelling alternative, today I want to examine the character who currently holds the mantle of One Piece's final boss. Because while on the one hand the Dark Lord trope has been done to death and carries the risk of being generic, at the same time, One Piece has the potential to make use of this archetype of evil emperor in a way that no other story can, because this has become a 1200 chapter epic that revolves entirely around the concept of freedom, meaning there is genuinely an opportunity here to tell the most dramatic tale of rebellion ever, which in turn suggests that we could have the greatest authoritarian ruler ever to rebel against. So let's break down the possibility that Emu may not simply be One Piece's final boss, but that he has everything going for him to go down as the greatest final boss in manga history. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. But first, if you want to use a high quality VPN for less than $3 a month, Surfshark is offering that deal to my viewers right now. Surfshark VPN is the sponsor of this video, and in case you don't know what VPNs are, most people are using VPNs when they are online nowadays, as it's a necessity to make sure that your data does not get stolen. And Surfshark in particular can even warn you about scam emails. But the best part is that Surfshark VPN allows you to change your location online to anywhere you want on the globe. Let me tell you, that gives you so much more access to so many movies, TV shows, and live events that are all streaming for free, just in other countries. For example, there are anime that are free on Netflix streaming, but only in Japan. But with Surfshark, you can just change your location online to Japan and get free access with the click of a button. And if VPNs sound too good to be true, that's because most of them are pretty expensive. Most cost about $15 a month, but Surfshark is a world-class, award-winning VPN with over 4,500 servers in 140 locations that is offering my viewers a deal for less than $3 a month, and the best part is you can keep that price for up to 2 years. And on top of that, if you follow my link, you can get an extra 4 months free of Surfshark VPN. All you have to do is go to surfshark.com/Morge or use code Morge at checkout to get your Surfshark deal today for less than $3 a month and 4 extra months free. Just follow the link, or you can scan the QR code below. So that aside, to begin with, how well does the big bad Dark Lord villain tend to work in other series? Well, if we look at most of the famous and popular examples, they tend to be from older works, before the cliche began to feel more played out. After all, nowadays it can feel a bit too linear for a story to be from the beginning about a big final boss who rules everything, who must be defeated, and we then simply watch the hero work their way towards defeating them. A variation on the concept that is more common nowadays is the idea of a great evil that once ruled over everyone, but who was temporarily removed from power for certain reasons, and is now threatening to come back to take their place over everyone again. In anime and manga, for example, we see this with the likes of All for One or the infamous Kaguya, and I would argue that neither of these are examples of the trope being done well, and these types of villains can often take the spotlight at the expense of more interesting characters. And that really has become the fundamental flaw with the big bad overlord archetype. It is arguably the simplest type of good versus evil conflict to set up, and readers nowadays can often fall into the camp of either wanting something more fresh, or at least wanting the big bad overlord archetype to be pulled off in a manner that is so profoundly well done that it does not feel generic. That is the uphill battle that One Piece is facing with Emu. However, there is a lot that Oda has already done that sets Emu up to buck the trend and go down as a genuinely groundbreaking villain. To begin with, Emu exists in this beautiful middle ground wherein he both existed and at the same time did not exist from the beginning of the story. By that I mean we never technically knew about the character named named Imu himself, his existence was never unveiled until 900 chapters into the story. However, Imu isn't a random late-game addition to One Piece, because Imu's shadow still stretched across those first 900 chapters. See, what Oda has done with One Piece that is completely unique is how he has developed the world government. Yes, you have countless works of dystopic fiction wherein there is some great evil government that must be overthrown, but the simple choice that Oda made with his regime that has made all the difference is that Oda did not tell us early on that his government was evil. In fact, he let the story play out bit by bit over an extraordinarily long period of time, never actually outright telling us that the government was evil, just letting us ever so slowly awaken to this fact. And that is what ultimately made the full unveiling that the greatest evil in the world was in fact the government itself so powerful. There is a special, visceral sort of hate you see amongst the One Piece fandom for the world government that you don't really see in the same way among Star Wars fans against the Empire, or amongst Lord of the Rings fans against Mordor. And this has very little to do with how terrible each regime respectively is. After all evil fantasy empires do terrible things. Rather, the distinction is in that the world government is terrible while successfully convincing everyone that it is in fact good. It's not just that we see the world government commit genocide, it's that the world government commits genocide while simultaneously getting all the normal, innocent citizens of the world to happily cheer it on. And even here, it's not even like Oda is the only author ever to write an evil regime that convinces people it is good, but the difference is that Oda doesn't reveal this fact to the reader for an unprecedentedly long period of time. Oda hides this fact so well from us that he straight up lies to us about the genre of fiction that we are reading for the first 400 chapters. We think we're supposed to be on an adventure treasure hunt this whole time, when in fact this story is all about revolution. We, the reader, are being deceived from the beginning of One Piece, and it's that absurdly slow process of gradually unveiling the truth that makes One Piece's dystopia stand out from any other. Now, what does any of this have to do with Imu? Well, it all comes down to how Oda has cultivated the desire for readers to see rebellion and justice brought against unjust authority. Making the reader care and feel emotion is the hard part. How Oda is now directing that to give us a single clear target for all that angry emotion is where the potential brilliance of Imu as the final villain comes in. Now, if there's one thing that readers are made to hate even more than the world government, it's the Celestial Dragons, because while we can hate the world government for pretending to be good and even tricking us for so long, we hate the Celestial Dragons even more for finally giving us a set of individuals behind the world government. Once the Celestial Dragons were revealed, the world government stopped being this faceless entity, and our hatred finally solidified around a specific group of characters. And of course, with the Celestial Dragons, our hatred was further amplified even beyond what we felt for the world government because of how much the Celestial Dragons reveled in this phony world that they'd created and the cruelty that they got away with. And then on top of all that, we have the fact that this infuriatingly unjust world with its unjust system has been in place for the last 800 years. A millennium of people suffering and being deluded into thanking the ones who inflict the suffering upon them. This entire scenario creates a deep sense of righteous indignation in the reader. Even though it's a fantasy story, I would argue that Oda has set up a scenario and slowly unveiled it to us in a manner that is optimized to maximize sheer anger. Everyone who has read through One Piece is firmly emotionally invested in wanting to see this particular dystopia be eradicated and brought to justice in a way that I truly believe no other fictional work does. And I believe a large part of it comes from the fact that the way the world government works is so very real, in that it is plausible in the real world for a regime to convince its citizens for centuries that it is good and just, and to project that image to the world at large while simultaneously sweeping its dirty secrets and inhumane crimes under the rug. So with all this built up anger against this concept of the world government and the Celestial Dragons, all Oda needed to do at the end was to give us a figure to direct all that hate towards. Someone, a single person, needs to bear the brunt of 800 years of comeuppance for what has been done to this fictional world. Someone that can be beat down at the end of all this build up to give us a real sense of satisfaction. That is the area in which Oda's Oda's writing for Imu is simply unmatched, the stage that Oda has set for him. I think even if readers aren't yet certain that Imu himself is going to live up to all-time great fictional overlords, I do think that all One Piece readers would definitively agree that the Celestial Dragons and the world government are their most hated regime in fiction, and that One Piece's 800-year-long revolution in the making to finally liberate the world from their evil is the best developed rebellion storyline in modern times. I know a lot of people feel that Imu should have been introduced earlier or that he's being revealed too late in the game, but the whole concept only works with Imu being unveiled last in the chain. First, we were shown that some marines were corrupt, which we didn't like, but we accepted that the world can't be perfect. Then we were shown that some kings are evil, but are backed by this mysterious world government, which we also didn't like, and it made us start suspecting this government, but still we saw it housed many good kings as well. But then we realized that no, in actuality the world government itself is evil, obscenely evil in fact, and only then did we find out just how unfathomably terrible the nobles who run this government are. And only after all that context could we finally find out the root of all evil. Who created the government and the systems of nobles in the first place? Who made the world like this? If we had just known that there was an evil devil at the center of it all from the beginning, then that would defeat the entire point of what One Piece is trying to do over the course of the story, which is to gradually challenge our notions of good and evil, just and unjust, authority and criminal. Instead of just telling us the regime is bad from the start, One Piece makes us slowly grow to understand and despise it, till we reach a point where we just want the whole thing torn down, to pull it out by its roots, and only then is it time for us to discover said root. So now that we have reached the root of all evil, how fitting is it that the concept of Imu is essentially the devil masquerading as God, the perfect reflection of how the world government was slowly revealed to be an evil regime that had simply been masquerading as a good one. So now that everything is laid out for Imu to excel as a final villain, the brilliant setup, the emotional momentum built over 1200 chapters against everything he represents, all that matters now is whether the actual character of Imu himself can effectively fulfill two things. First, be a threat worthy of the final boss at the end of this long journey. And second, also have a persona that is worthy of shouldering 1200 chapters of built-up hate among the readers against the world government. Let's look at that first criteria. With so much of the story's narrative built towards overthrowing the world government, with literally 800 years of suffering that must be undone, and with so many countless other powerful villains that have already posed such significant challenges to Luffy, who now need to feel minor in comparison to the final boss, there is a huge burden on Imu to deliver on being the ultimate threat. That is not just about how strong he is, but also in how he is portrayed, how effective he actually is in the narrative, and the feeling that he instills in the reader every time he is on screen. So far, Imu's had the benefit of getting to exist in the shadows. Every time he makes an appearance, it has been exciting because he is this mysterious, inscrutable being that we're only seeing a glimpse of. It's almost easier when a villain gets to operate in a shroud of mystery. The hard part is when they actually step into the spotlight and have to deliver. The good news is that Imu's grand reveal undoubtedly lives up to the hype. It truly feels as though Satan himself has taken the stage, and the world of One Piece will never be the same again. Imu's design is excellent, but more importantly, the reactions that he brings out of all those who witness his arrival and the atmosphere that he creates are exactly what was required. Again, Imu can't just be strong, he needs to affect the tone of the story itself. Imu needs to feel like a threat that the protagonists themselves find to be near insurmountable. And bringing an absolutely oppressive atmosphere to the land of Elbaf, filled with many of the strongest characters in the world, is the perfect start. Now, we've already gotten to see a glimpse of just how invincible Imu is, as the 6 greatest legends of the modern age were completely unable to harm him, clearly establishing that Imu was on another level. However, there's a difference between being a villain who is hard to hurt and a villain who is genuinely capable of inducing terror from their overwhelming power, and that is the real bar that Imu needs to hit. It was a little worrisome early on, as Imu for some time did seem like a bit of a petulant and easily upset character, which can make him seem less intimidating overall. And as Usopp rightly called out, Imu seemed a bit too reliant on puppeteering others. In combat, Imu's only real ability was being impervious to damage. However, now with Imu's true form finally getting to shine, it seems like those earlier concerns are being put to bed. Imu does genuinely seem like the most powerful being on the planet. Imu does seem like a villain that exudes a truly commanding presence. And Imu does seem like a villain who can create a sense of genuine fear in the protagonist. this. However, what about Imu's actual character? Can he distinguish himself from the myriad of other all-powerful evil overlords in fiction? But first, we are doing a huge spring sale, where you can buy any 2 posters and get 3 free. And I mean any posters, because this month only, we are bringing back all the posters from all of our collections. That's right, you can mix and match any 5 posters from any collection, and when you add them to the cart, 3 of them will automatically be free. And this month only, you can also get the God Trio of posters: Nidhogg, Nika, and Imu, each with their own hidden image inside the poster. If you've been holding off on getting your posters, this spring sale is your chance to get them at a major discount. The spring sale ends in April, and the God Trio posters are going out of production. So get your posters while this spring sale lasts by hitting the link in the description below. So a common misconception I see around Imu's character is that Imu needs to be very deep or morally nuanced. Imu does not need to be those things, any more than Enel needed to be those things. Imu is in fact the last character in One Piece that needs some sort of sad, humanizing backstory, as Imu as a character is meant to be the ultimate representation of all the egotistical, narcissistic, god-complex, self-obsessed assholes that we've had in One Piece, who are at their most effective when they are not sympathetic. Remember, every single atrocious, heinous, unforgivable act of evil that we see committed by the world government or by the Celestial Dragons traces back to Imu. As the literal root of all evil, Imu is not meant to be ambiguous. He is a character who will casually commit genocide because he feels like it, and he's done this apparently many times. There is no point to humanizing Imu, just as there is no point in humanizing the devil. It's easy to mistake the fact that lots of times villains can be made better by giving them some complex, nuanced backstory for the notion that this is the only way to write a good villain. Lots of times, a great villain is one that is simply extremely hateable. And this is an area that One Piece excels in time and time again, crafting villains who are just plain and simple evil, with no sympathetic backstory, who are designed to give us an extreme sense of satisfaction upon being defeated. Note, sometimes with villains like Arlong and Crocodile, Oda will give us some sympathetic context, but only far later down the line. Oda only does this after said villains have been defeated, because making them sympathetic in any way prior to their defeat would only take away from the amount of pure, untainted hatred that we feel for them when it is time for Luffy to kick their ass. You can only feel maximum catharsis for a villain's defeat when you do not feel the slightest shred of sympathy for them. That's also why with the Celestial Dragons so far, Oda has made us feel hate, and only hate. And it's also why many of One Piece's most absolutely satisfying moments have come from delivering justice to these irredeemable and completely unsympathetic villains. For the 800 years of suffering to finally have a true sense of catharsis, for one villain to have to represent the weight of all that, and for us to feel the maximum level of joy in seeing this symbol of all oppression and injustice get his long overdue comeuppance, there is literally no point in making him sympathetic. It would be far better to make him as hateable as possible, to make his defeat and the moment the world is liberated that much more triumphant. In that regard, Oda has not yet done enough with Imu. We understand that Imu is tangentially responsible for a lot of evils throughout the world. He is the cause behind so much slavery and genocide. We've even started to see him personally commit acts of genocide, like with Lulusia Kingdom, and on a smaller and more personal scale, we've seen what he's done to beloved characters like Rox and Harold, but Imu's persona still feels a little vague at the moment, like just a very mean shadow. For us to truly hate Imu, he has to stop feeling like a concept and more like a person. And this is where the upcoming Void Century flashback comes in. This flashback should in no way make Imu sympathetic. No, this is the perfect opportunity to really see the original man that Imu once was. Saint Imu Narona, a king just like the others, and show us beat for beat how a narcissistic, power-obsessed manipulator deceived the entire world and caused the death of nearly all people on the planet. How he turned everyone against the Ancient Kingdom, against Joy Boy and the D-Clan, how he caused the enslavement of the Fishman race, how he built the corrupt system that exists today, so on and so forth. I think this is where Oda can truly shine in creating an evil overlord like never before, simply in crafting the most awful and despicable fictional character in history, who has readers begging to be overthrown and brought to justice unlike any other. Potentially the perfect final villain for a story all about rebellion. So let me know in the comments below what you think about Imu's potential as an all-time great villain, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear a lot of mistakes that past anime and manga final villains have had that I believe believe Oda will avoid, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon. Link in the description below. And make sure to get your Surfshark deal for less than $3 a month and 4 extra months free by going to surfshark.com/Morge or using code Morge at checkout. Link in the description below or scan the QR code.